Ohio becomes deeply red, but it didn't help President Trump. Joining us on Columbus on the Record this week, Laura Bischoff, State House reporter for the Dayton Daily News, Terry Casey, Republican strategist, Jackie Borchert, Columbus bureau chief for the Cincinnati Enquirer, and Dale Butlin, Democratic strategist. At the start of the presidential campaign, Ohio was a flyover state. The top tickets traveled to Pennsylvania and then flew over Ohio to get to Michigan and Wisconsin and even Minnesota. Pundits and pollsters questioned that strategy. Ohio's commercial TV stations longed for those political ad dollars, and it was only at the very end that Biden and President Trump paid any attention to Ohio as the polls showed a dead heat. Well, it looks like the candidates had it right at the start. The gap in the so-called blue wall remained quite red. Donald Trump beat Joe Biden in Ohio by the same margin. He beat Hillary Clinton 4 years ago. Biden won more votes than Hillary Clinton did, but Trump 2020 won more votes than Trump 2016. Jackie Borchert, the signs were there. Huge turnout, polls were tight. Biden had a chance, and he didn't. What happened?
Well, if you look at the map from Tuesday and you look at the map from 2016, they're pretty much the same. It's a few small changes. Montgomery County, home to Dayton, turned back blue again. And it looks like Trump might win Lorain County outside of Cleveland and also Mahoning County. So I think what we're seeing is a solidifying of kind of a realignment of the parties in Ohio, especially in the Mahoning Valley region, which used to be, staunchly Democrat for decades. And the thought of Mahoning County flipping red on election night, I think, just kind of made several heads explode in the state among Democrats. It's just one of those things that, even 8, 10, 30 years ago, unthinkable. And I think people thought that Joe Biden might do better in those areas than Hillary Clinton did because he was a little bit of a different candidate. He was running on much more of a jobs message than Clinton did, but that didn't seem to make a difference.
Laura Bischoff, Trumbull County, just north of Mahoning County. This is the county that is home to the Lordstown GM plant that closed. Donald Trump did better in that county this time than he did even the last time. Trump won Michigan. He won Wisconsin. He won Minnesota. He's going to win Pennsylvania. Why couldn't he win? Why couldn't Joe Biden win Ohio? Why couldn't Joe Biden win Ohio when he won Pennsylvania, Michigan, and Wisconsin?
Well, part of it is that the Biden campaign didn't really get its ground game going in Ohio until pretty late in the game. They mapped out different paths to 270 for Joe Biden, and Ohio was on some of those paths, but not a lot of them. And so I think on a national level, the campaign opted to focus on other states, such as Pennsylvania, Wisconsin, Michigan. And so Ohio didn't get quite as much attention from the Biden campaign until public polls showed that it was a toss-up, which we know was like just more bad polling numbers. And so I think part of it was the ground game. Some of it also, it's just baffling to me why, people in the Trumbull County, Mahoning Valley, why the Lordstown closure didn't carry through to vote against President Trump. Yeah. And that's something that Sherrod Brown said on a press call this week, was that he was very puzzled by that as well.
Dale Butlin, what happened?
Well, in Ohio, it was like the last 4 years never happened. Like he did in 2016, Trump won by 8 points here. Actually, his margin this year was a little bit higher, which is why, Mike, in my view, as you know, because I've said it many times on this show before, it's time to drop the fiction that Ohio is still a swing state. It is now a red state that is getting redder with each passing election. And there's a demographic reason for that. There's a reason why Ohio, unlike our Midwestern neighbors, didn't turn blue either this year or in the 2018 midterms. Simply put, Ohio's population is older, whiter, and less educated than the populations of Wisconsin, Michigan, Minnesota, and Pennsylvania, which makes us the profile of the Trump voter. And that's why this week, for the first time since 1960, a Democrat won the presidency without carrying the state of Ohio.
Terry Casey, is this just Trump's personality, or can Republican candidates for president from now on reliably count on Ohio to vote for them? Or is this just a one-off candidate that inspires those white working class voters to vote for him rather than the Democrat?
Well, I think Ohio is still in play potentially, but you've also got to give a lot of credit, we'll talk about it more later, to David Pepper, who might be the Republican Party's most valuable player, because between him and some of his puppeteers, they continue to not understand a lot of parts of Ohio. And you mentioned Trumbull County, there's a state Senate race there where it looks like a Republican's going to win and gain an extra state Senate seat. So there's a lot of problems, but I think part of it is both in Columbus and nationally, they just don't understand the nature of Ohio, what a diverse state it is. And Ohio is still a state, I think, with 12 to 13% African-American population. So there's still a lot of diversity, but I've also heard, like from a former Democrat mayor in Cincinnati, that the black community just wasn't that excited this election. Part of that was Biden. I think part of it's the structure of the Democrat Party in the state.
How the candidates dealt with the tight race differed greatly over the course of the past week. Joe Biden said he was confident, but he urged patience.
In America, the vote is sacred. It's how people of this nation express their will. And it is the will of the voters, no one, not anything else, that chooses the President of the United States of America. So each ballot must be counted. And that's what we're going to see going through now.
President Trump declared victory, though. He didn't wait, and in a statement filled with false statements and unsubstantiated allegations that we're not going to air, but we will air a smidgen of truth in that statement.
I've already decisively won many critical states, including massive victories in Florida, Iowa, Indiana, Ohio.
Fact check, true. The rest of the news conference, not so much. Terry Casey, what do you make of what's going on here? I mean, it's close, but it's trending towards Joe Biden. Why the conspiracy theories? Why the false allegations of, everyone and his brother out to get him?
Like in sports, most people don't like to lose, and that includes the president. And he also has continued a little bit mixed messages, because in Arizona, he wants to keep counting votes, but in Pennsylvania and Georgia, he wants to stop counting. Well, the reality is you've got to keep on counting. We got to find out what the totals and what the numbers are. And also his lawyers, ultimately, I've been involved in a lot of recounts in Ohio, a lot of close races, including down to single digits when the difference is. But if you're going to contest an election in a court of law, you've got to have facts and evidence. There's certainly questions, but unless you have evidence, don't bother coming to the court. Don't expect the new U.S. Supreme Court to bail you out.
Yeah, but the problem is his supporters hear this and they believe it. Rush Limbaugh today, he was throwing everything at the wall. Everything's conspiring against Trump. Didn't make any sense.
Yeah,
but
well,
those folks are listening to
this. Sorry, Mike. I cut you off there. I didn't mean to. Sorry.
So what do you make of this, and how do you think it ends if Trump does not concede?
Well, let me take the last part first. It doesn't matter if Trump doesn't concede. There is nothing in the Constitution that says that the vanquished candidate has to concede. Now, obviously, every other president in modern time has done so. But this started, election night when at 2:00 in the morning, President Trump took the podium and started the conspiracy theories and how this election was rigged. It was being stolen from him. It is a shameful and disgraceful performance because it casts doubt on the integrity of our most fundamental democratic process in this country. I think that what Donald Trump has been doing, and it's of a piece with what he's done for the past 4 years, he has assaulted the fundamental principles of our country. He has attacked truth. He has attacked integrity. And it is absolutely shameful. But in the end, it's not going to matter because the votes are the votes. They are going to be counted. And as we're seeing now, if if Joe Biden holds on in Pennsylvania and in Arizona, Nevada, and Georgia, he's going to end up with 306 electoral votes, which, irony of all ironies, is the exact number of electoral votes that Donald Trump had in 2016, albeit with a different constellation of states.
And he called that a landslide victory in the Electoral College
Yeah.
4 years ago. Laura Bischoff, Republican lawmakers have been very reluctant to criticize the president openly. They kind of they word their statements very carefully. They're cagey, but criticizing the thought behind the statement, but not the statement itself. How are lawmakers right now reacting to the reluctance to concede and the propagation of conspiracy theories?
Well, I think it's exactly as you described. They're being kind of cagey. They're reluctant to come right out and say, make a statement like Dale just did and say that the president is assaulting the institution and undermining the elections and the truth, et cetera. So I think they're just a little more cautious about it. I think once the counting is all over with and there's a clear declaration, then I think that we'll hear stronger statements from members of Congress and from state legislators, et cetera, if Donald Trump continues to make noise that he was cheated and it was full of fraud.
Jackie Borchard, Donald Trump, he'll leave office and he will not be on the ballot. He'll leave the stage to some degree. But his voters are still here, and they voted for him in overwhelming amounts here in Ohio. Republican lawmakers still need those folks to vote for them in 2 years, in 4 years. So they can't completely distance themselves from Trump, can they?
Yeah, I think you're right. And I think it might even, the effects of Trumpism will probably last for several years. And it's not like just because he leaves the White House. I mean, it's more than just him. It's become kind of a movement. And yeah, I think Republicans do have that question of, we can't abandon these voters. We need to keep them, but also we're going to have a different makeup at the top. So I don't know exactly what will happen, but I do think that's not something that's just going to go away overnight. I really think that type of voter too, that as someone who feels, they like a more populist candidate, an America First candidate, I feel like maybe there will be other candidates that will fill that role and they'll already have a willing base ready for them when that happens.
Jim Jordan comes to mind. Wonder what his plans are down the road. Anyway, Joe Biden provided very little momentum for Ohio Democrats looking for upsets. Jim Jordan and all of Ohio's incumbent congressmen and women won re-election. Here in Central Ohio, Democrat Elena Shear was hoping a Biden blue wave would help her upset Republican freshman Troy Balderson. It was not to be. Republicans also held firm control of the Ohio House and Senate. Laura Bischoff, Donald Trump is the one who had the coattails here today, this year, for Republicans.
Yeah, absolutely. The blue wave never materialized. It was more like a red wave in Ohio, and that definitely showed up in the legislative races. I think the House, the Republican caucus in the House picked up a couple seats. Looks like in the Senate, there's Stephanie Coonsey from Central Ohio is leading Crystal Lett, the Democrat challenger, by just 41 votes, but that could change as the provisionals and absentee ballots are counted. So anyway, it's interesting because I thought maybe with House Bill 6 and the $60 million bribery scandal kind of hanging as a cloud over the State House, that would maybe provide, maybe voters would be paying attention and would penalize incumbent lawmakers for that, but that certainly wasn't the case.
Dale Butlin, who's to blame for this? I mean, every Franklin County Republican I talked to before the election thought that Stephanie Coonsey was toast because of movement in the suburbs to Biden and to Democrats and away from Trump, and she's hanging on. Right now she's going to win that seat, depending the recount in the provisional ballots. Why weren't Democrats more successful?
Well, first of all, Stephanie Kunze is sort of the outlier here in Franklin County. It was a very good night for Democrats in Franklin County.
Yes.
We won almost everything here, but I think your point is broader than that. I think your point is who's to blame for this fiasco that we had again at the state level. And I don't know that it's a matter of personalities. I really think, Mike, as I said a few moments ago, Ohio is now a red state. Look, Sherrod Brown, it's true, won re-election a couple of years ago, but he carried fewer counties than he did 6 years before. And yes, Democrats won a Supreme Court seat this year, but let's not forget that judicial candidates are the only candidates who don't have their party affiliations listed on the ballot. So none of these small victories that we've had can change the fact that Trump won Ohio 4 years ago. The Democrats, as I think Jackie said, lost Mahoning County for the first time in I think a half a century, or that we also managed to lose even more seats in the state house and Senate where we're already a distinct minority. It's really hard, and I get my party mad at me every time I say this, but I think we Democrats have to face facts. When one party, the Republicans, have won every statewide race and controlled every lever of state government for 24 out of the last 28 years, it's hard to conclude that Ohio is still a swing state.
Terry Casey, gerrymandered districts, they're still here. They were drawn almost 10 years ago, but they're the same shape they were 10 years ago or 8 years ago now. And it's still an uphill fight for Democrats in particular in these state Senate districts, really in particular, to win because they are drawn to help Republicans. Is that still playing a role, even when Joe Biden did turn out a lot of votes in the suburbs in some of these seats that you think might have flipped?
Well, you can argue gerrymandering's a factor, but I also think it's partly because many cases Republicans either have better candidates or run better campaigns. And you've also got to give some credit overall to Mike DeWine, because Mike, I think, has been a very effective governor in how he's dealt with COVID, how he's shown the leadership, how hard he's been working. And I think that helps the Republican brand in a state like Ohio to have that kind of leadership at the top from a governor.
Democrats hope to win 2 seats on the Ohio Supreme Court. They got 1. Democrat Jennifer Brunner beat Republican incumbent Judith French for a seat on the state's highest court. But Republican incumbent Sharon Kennedy defeated Democratic challenger John O'Donnell, which gives the GOP a 1-seat majority on the Supreme Court. Jackie Borchard, what does this mean to the Supreme Court going forward? Is it that big of a deal that it's 4-3 Republican versus 4-3 Democrat?
I think so. I think the Supreme Court, they run in partisan primaries. On the general ballot, as Dale mentioned, they don't have their party affiliation listed next to their name. And the judicial branch likes to place itself above politics. And I'm hoping that remains the case. And so I think just more important than having a partisan balance on the court is having kind of some diversity on the court and having, different backgrounds and life experiences, I think plays just as much a role. I know one of the Democrats' prime complaints about the current court is that it's too pro-business. And so at least by bringing Jennifer Brunner on, you've got another voice that's not afraid to vote against business. That was something that she was running on. And she was also running on gerrymandering because you mentioned we're going to come up with some new state house and congressional district maps next year. And the Supreme Court has jurisdiction over complaints about that map. And, it may even get to the stage where if the legislators and policymakers can't come up with a map that meets the rules that Ohio voters approved into past ballot measures, then the Supreme Court gets to weigh in. So and they see too that Chief Justice Maureen O'Connor has swung with the two. She's sided with the 2 Democrats that are currently on the court in several opinions. So they're hopeful that there will be more 4-3 decisions 5-2 decisions, just having that mix.
Yeah, she has been a bit of a centrist as the Chief Justice. Our last topic is certainly not our least topic. Overshadowed a bit by the election drama, Ohio is experiencing a severe spike in COVID-19 cases. Just a few weeks ago, where we're seeing about 1,000 new cases a day, now it has topped 5,000 new cases a day. More than half of Ohio's counties, the red ones, have very high rates of spread of COVID. The other half have increased exposure. Those are the orange ones. Well, Governor DeWine hinted that state orders could be coming. For now, he's hoping that people get the message.
So as it starts to impact more and more people, particularly in our rural areas that have been spared, I do believe that people will understand the urgency of this and that we'll start seeing more wearing of masks and more distancing and more smart decisions being made.
Jackie Borchert, did I hear him straight that he said people aren't going to get the message until they get sick? I mean, that's what I thought he said.
Yeah, I think, we were expecting maybe not even more restrictions, but some sort of new prong to the response, given that we've had so many record-breaking case numbers in the last couple of weeks. So the fact, though, that he said that he is considering some restrictions or something is promising. I mean, looking back to the spring, everything that he rolled out, every restriction, every closure, he backed that up by warning in advance, hey, things are getting bad. We're thinking about this. We're considering this. So I think that was maybe the first hint that something's coming. The big, people see case numbers and they think, well, it's just because we're doing more testing. And it's really not. I mean, our case numbers have gone up way more proportionally to our testing increases. And then our hospitals are starting to see more patients too. Just on Friday, set another record for the number of currently hospitalized patients in the state, 2,170. Just 2 weeks ago, we were at about 1,350. So, the hospital folks are telling my colleagues in Cincinnati that, if we continue at this rate, we're going to be in big trouble just 2 or 3 weeks from now.
Laura Bischoff, we have a new state director of public health, Stephanie McLeod. She's coming from the Bureau of Workers' Compensation. She is not a physician. She is an administrator, apparently a successful administrator. What does that mean for the fight against COVID, Laura?
Well, she'll be backed up by Chief Medical Officer, Dr. I think it's Vanderhoff.
Yes, Bruce Vanderhoff.
Yeah. And so I think it kind of returns to a model that they had in the Kasich years, in which Rick Hodges, who formerly ran the Turnpike Commission, he was the administrator and was backed up by a medical director as well. Stephanie McLeod's been around for a while. I think she's an attorney. She's an administrator. She's also the daughter of Phil Burris, who is the guy who was with Citizens for Community Values, which put the defense of marriage, the gay marriage ban, on the ballot in 2004.
Dale Butland.
So the pro-life groups are very happy with this pick, and then the abortion rights groups are very unhappy with this.
Dale Butland, disappointed that the governor didn't appoint a doctor. He tried to, and it didn't work out. And this time he just went with the administrator.
Yeah, well, look, Mike, I think even though the skyrocketing number of new COVID cases that we have here in Ohio shows pretty clearly that the governor's reliance on personal responsibility isn't working. But I think this week's election results are going to put a damper, frankly, on Governor DeWine's willingness to impose mandatory measures no matter how bad things get. Look, Donald Trump ran on the idea that COVID isn't as bad as everybody says, and that public health should take a back seat to reopening schools, bars, restaurants, and the economy as a whole. Joe Biden had a different idea, but the fact that Ohioans chose Trump by such a large margin, coupled with the attacks that DeWine has already been getting from his fellow Republicans in the legislature over his previous restrictions, I think are going to curb his appetite for making masks or social distancing mandatory.
Dale, I got to cut you there because we got to get to our off-the-record comments. Just 2 minutes left. Terry Casey, your off-the-record final thought.
Well, we're going to turn the page to 2021, and the legislature's got a lot of work on the budget. The good news is so far, revenues are coming in close to estimate. Expenditures are under control, but there's some big labor negotiations coming up. So the legislature in the first 6 months of next year, they're going to earn their money figuring out the budget and solving these other issues and challenges.
Dale Butlin.
Well, I'm relieved that Donald Trump will be removed from office. As an American, I'm deeply disappointed. Not that there wasn't a blue wave in this election, but that there wasn't a moral wave of revulsion against the most manifestly unfit president in American history. After 4 years of unprecedented lying, race baiting, bigotry, and division, just under half the voters of this country said, yeah, I want 4 more years of that. Our country is not only polarized, we're locked into a tribalism so deep we can't even agree on wearing masks to protect each other in the middle of a pandemic. So God bless America, because heaven knows we're going to need it.
Jackie Borchard, your final thought.
Well, Ohio didn't have a marijuana legalization measure on the ballot this year because COVID stopped that effort. But there were 4 small communities in Athens and Jefferson County that passed decriminalization measures. So if you have a small amount of marijuana, you don't get, and you're caught, you don't get any jail time, no fine.
And Laura Bischoff, real quick, 15 seconds.
So the Ohio Supreme Court ruled 6-1 this week on, said Bellbrook schools do not have to release the school records for the Dayton shooter. Former classmates of this guy told us that he had developed hit lists and rape lists when he was in high school. The Dayton Daily and other media organizations sued for the records, and we don't get the records, and we'll never know how the school district handled those disciplinary issues or get any insights.
Thanks very much. Have a good week, everyone.